Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our public safety webinar titled Enhancing Security Operations Using Open Source GIS Data, subtitle of Operational Workflows to Support Government and Private Sector Operations. Our speakers today, my name is Carl Walter. I'm the Director of Homeland Security Solutions here at Esri. Joining me for our webinar today are Lyle Wright and Seth Doherty. Lyle is our lead for Archaea Business Solutions, and Seth Doherty is a product engineer on the same team. Our emails are listed below there, should anybody wish to contact us afterwards. In addition to who we are, I always like to share who the participants and the registrants are. So we have about 250 registrants, and they come from just about every sector: local, state, federal, U.S. government. We have a bunch of private sector security folks, some from the health industry, and a significant group of folks from overseas, from DoD groups. Our agenda today is we're going to have 3 modules. In between each module, we're going to share with you some really basic poll questions designed for us to get a bit of an understanding of the types of things you guys want to see, as well as how you're leveraging some of the things we're going to show you. One of the common problems that we hear from the client side is about access to data, and we don't have data. Where can we get data? So we're going to show you numerous open source data examples and data repositories, common data sets that we, quite frankly, I don't think we promote well enough to our client base, and therefore it's not used. And in addition to show you how to bring some of this data in, some of the technical tradecraft, some of the analytical tradecraft, we're also going to show you different examples of, in our first model, general reports, focused reports around communities at risk using the business analyst widget, finding areas of constraints using community analysts, and finding data from ArcGIS Online and the Living Atlas through a concept that we call business resilience. Our second module would be about ingesting crime data from an open data portal. The example we're going to be using is from Washington, D.C. Metro Police. We're also going to do a pattern of life analysis, again, using data what would probably, in this example, come from internal data sources. We're going to show a pattern of life through photos coming from a cell phone. And then the third module will be about ingesting third-party, we will call threat feeds, and we're going to highlight 2 different business partners, one Global Incident Map, GIM, and the other one from Factal. And again, before we get into the technical demonstrations, I just want to clarify, when we say open source, we mean publicly available, for free or for purchase. A third party might be selling it, but essentially also data that is accessible through your organization, through your agency, primarily without the use of a warrant. So this is information that's out there that you can get your hands on, and we just want to show you a little bit of how to do that, and then on the back end of that, a little bit about the tradecraft of what to do with it once you actually have it. So I'm now going to turn it over to Lyle Wright, and he's going to go through our first module. And Lyle, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Carl. So I want to start off by just highlighting some of the information that we can gather, or the data that we can gather from Esri when you're an Esri user. And I want to start off by looking at what reports that we have available. So there are a few different options on how we can gather information from the reports that Esri provides. And the first one is just by looking at the By Esri Reports website. What this essentially allows you to do is go through a 3-step process, allows you to understand the variables that you want to consume, the location that you want to consume those from, and then just purchase that report. So what does that look like if I was to walk through that for just a quick demonstration of the example of what a report would be? I can choose a category based on a type, and from that type I have a variety of different variables that are available to me. I can highlight each of these variables that is concerning. If I wanted to have a better example or just a better understanding of what one of these reports looks like, I can go and look at an actual sample version of this report to have a better understanding of what that report looks like. So here is that sample report. Before I actually purchase it, I can see that. And then once I've highlighted the reports that are necessary for me to do whatever business, I essentially say confirm. And at this point, I just choose the location type. I can choose an address, a latitude, longitude, or for instance, just a zip code. So I'll type in a zip code of interest. That will allow you to understand exactly where that report is generating that information from, and I hit confirm. At this point, what I do is I just say check out, and I would download these reports, and these reports would then be readily available to me via PDF. So that's one way that we're able to get reports from the Esri ecosystem. There's a possibility, though, that there might be a little bit more information that I want. Esri also provides a tailored focus report around a particular problem set. So let's go ahead and just type in that same address. And then define exactly how I want this report built. From that one location, I was just pulling that location with the zip code, but instead of just doing the zip code, what I can do is I have a few options here. I can choose a radius as a crow flies of 1, 3, 5, and this is standard. I could change those if I want to. And then from that, it allows me to come in here and just choose these tailored reports that we give our customers to highlight a particular scenario. So like at-risk population is something I can come in here. And now this is going to be a report in the form of an infographic to allow me to understand at-risk population for this area that I just highlighted. It's a little bit different than what we just saw, but it's also something that is readily available. If I didn't want that report, I could also come in here and say, you know, if I just want a demographic profile, I could change that on the fly. And when I'm happy with the report that I've gotten, I can then download that and save that as a PDF. Or I can share it out a variety of other ways. So export the infographic would be an example of doing that. So what if I wanted that tailored report of that community at risk or other reports? I can also come in here and then choose a variety of other reports. So I'm just going to do a community profile and run that report for that same area. And that's going to download a PDF that I can then access, very simple and very easily available to us, the Esri ecosystem. From there, if I wanted to go back and just change exactly how I was pulling that, so I chose rings as a crow flies. Now I want to do a drive time, and for instance, I want to do, let's say 3, 7, and 10-minute drive times. I can do that and apply. And then it gives me that information, and all that same information you just went through is now available to me based on the drive time instead of just based on the radius. Now we see how our area that we're pulling from changes drastically based on drive time versus just as the crow flies. So these are two ways that we can get reports. Seth, I would like you now to go through another example of how we can utilize Esri to pull reports and generate some more information about a particular area.
Sure thing. All right, so I am an analyst in my area, and I'm trying to understand what areas are going to be at risk. So the application I'm going to be using in our suite is Community Analysts. And Community Analysts is an application that's designed to help government agencies and policymakers and civic organizations understand and improve the community by determining where to allocate resources that have the most impact and communicate that information. So what I'm going to do is walk through a simple workflow of identifying areas in my area of interest. And I'm going to actually do that through a smart map search. And with smart map searching, you can select your variables of interest and then set your ranges on each of those variables to identify the locations that meet those ranges. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And from here, we have a whole slew of categories that we can pick from as far as variables. And then even further, we can jump down and look at some of the variables within these categories. But I'm going to jump back and access some of my favorites. And I'm going to look at the 2019 crime index variable, as well as the 2019 disposable income. So if I go ahead and click apply, it's going to retrieve the data for this area, where then I can fine tune my variables to identify those areas. So let's say I'm going to look at a crime risk of 250, and this 250 corresponds to the index compared to the relative to the United States. So 100 is baseline, so 250, in an index of 250 means it's 2.5 times greater than the national average. And I'm also going to look at communities that are, say, where 50% of the communities have an income of 50% of the community has an income of $15,000 or less. And from here, quickly, we've identified and filtered out from our city to the areas that are most at risk. Furthermore, on each of these locations, we can run and create infographics and reports that Lyle just walked through. So therefore, let's say I want to create a report on the crime summary. So I can select a report right here, click on crime summary, run the report, and now I can go ahead and open the report to view that information about this particular location. Now, Lyle, I want to hand it back over to you so you can showcase how to access third-party content from Living Atlas.
Thank you, Seth. So Carl introduced us a part of this team called Archaea Solutions, and we want to start there to understand what solutions provide you in the reference of consuming all of this data that Carl is kind of made the webinar about, which is just consuming all this open source data. Archaea Solutions is highlighted in a variety of different industries, and Seth and I work on the business team. And under here we have solutions that are tailored and focused around utilizing this data in an effective way for businesses. So let's just dive into what the solution that we want to highlight and consume some of this data in from Living Atlas, which is business resilience. So what business resilience allows us to do is pull in information around all of our facilities in a way to truly understand what's happening on the ground. So we start off by being able to just look at a particular area of interest. So let's just go ahead and just focus in on Florida. And from there, we want to just be able to consume some information from the ArcGIS system. So the first thing we want to do is look at what's available through Living Atlas. So Living Atlas allows us to have content such as world imagery, world traffic services, transportation, and this information comes in a variety of ways. So let's just go look at some content that's trending. And if I would just go into the world traffic service and understand a bit more about this particular layer, it allows me to understand a few different things about this service. So first is it's an authoritative layer recommended by Esri. It's a part of the Living Atlas curated content and subscriber. So this is a curated layer that says that this is a valid, verified world traffic service. Now, a lot of times that's useful, but sometimes I want to pull in other data from other users. So how can I do that? Well, we have an add data app, an add data widget, a part of this app that allows us to go in and pull tools or pull data in a variety of ways. I can pull my own content in, I can pull content from my organization, or I can pull in information in for ArcGIS Online. So for instance, if I wanted to find just Florida cameras, Florida camera allows me to see there's a few different services available here. If I click on these, I can add this layer to the map and I get this information. If I want to look at the details of this, this is actually a layer that's just being shared by another user. It's not something that's coming from Living Atlas, but it's just something that's available. There's thousands upon thousands of layers out there that are available just to the ArcGIS user content that is shared without the community. So what does this do for me? If I come in here and I just look at this layer, it allows me essentially to highlight a location, and now I'm getting a live data feed from the actual traffic that's happening inside of Florida. So that's one curated content, but the thing is that I want to look at other stuff that's available as well. So let's look at like high field data. So I can just look up high field. So high field data allows us to then add a bit more authoritative information from those particular providers. So for instance, if I wanted to know where all my petroleum stations were, if I also wanted to know possibly where all the cell towers were, I can now add that information, and that's now coming in from the federal user community. So if I go to that content and look at it, I'm going to see this is a Living Atlas layer that's curated by Esri to allow us to provide this layer to our users. So here's two different varieties of data that we can provide to get information about areas that our business cares about. That's a way that we can provide that information to our users. So at this point, I'm going to pass it back over to Carl to ask a few questions. Carl, from the
yes, we're going to do a poll question real quickly. It's going to probably stay up there for about 20 to 30 seconds. And the question is, for our registrants, how valuable is simple access to demographic and community characteristics to your security mission? So while you're filling that out, so part of the reason why we're asking this is we, again, like I said earlier in the presentation, there is a massive ecosystem of information that's readily available, and we just don't think that a lot of folks know about it and are leveraging it. So we'd like to get a better understanding of what you folks think as to its value, or if it's not valuable to your organization. And there you can see the answers. About 58% found it valuable, 16 found it very valuable, can operate without it. And again, as part of the survey at the end of this presentation, you'll have the opportunity to ask us questions as well as identify things that you may want more information on, or if there's a better way that we can provide this information to the community. I'm going to now pass it back over to Lyle, and we're going to go over a couple different ideas and workflows and tradecraft on leveraging open data portals. And the example we're going to use is coming from Washington, D.C. Lyle, back over to you.
So I want to confirm that everyone can see the Open Data DC portal. That's where we're going to start with. And we're going to start with consuming content from other people outside of the Esri ecosystem, but still allowing us to be able to utilize that information. So a lot of our major cities in the United States have open data portals. An example here is I just want to find a few layers to be able to highlight some of the work we want to do. So I'm looking at crime layers. So here's a crime incidents in 2020. They also break this down into different areas. What this is essentially is all the locations of crime that have happened. And when you go to these portals, they usually give you a variety of ways that you can download that content. If you understand APIs, you can also configure the API to consume this information automatically. And we'll actually highlight how we do that with our business partners later on. But right now we're looking at downloading this content in a spreadsheet, a KML, or a shapefile. So I've downloaded these into a shapefile. And then from there, I want to be able to consume that information into ArcGIS. There's one other layer that I just want to be able to know is just get a better contextual information about DC. So I'm just going to download the neighborhoods clusters data set as well. So what that just gives me is a basic footprint of the clusters for each of those individual areas. And this is utilized in a variety of ways by the DC government. So now that I've pulled down the data, I want to also pull in a few solutions to allow me to understand that data. The first solution I'm going to use is called the incident analysis solution. What it's going to do is allow me to have some tailored analytical workflows that I can utilize. So if I wasn't someone that understood how to create a proper heat map, how to create clusters, how to create incident density around data, I can do that available. So I've already downloaded that. I'm going to be utilizing that. And the next thing is when I'm done looking at the DC data, I'm going to look at some local data. Carl gave me a bunch of his photos from his years of travel in the last few years. And I'm going to consume that information and utilize our crime analysis add-in. This is an add-in ribbon that is installed right into ArcGIS Pro to be able to understand kind of the path and the journey that Carl has taken over the years. So with that, let's go ahead and just dig into starting with the DC data. So here is a bunch of data for Washington, DC, and this is the raw shapefile that I just downloaded. The first thing I want to do is just be able to understand a bit more about the validity of the data and where and how much time it covers. So the first thing I wanted to be able to do is just be able to run a basic chart, and that chart just allows me to understand it by district. So here's all the information that's by districts, and the challenge is that if I highlight this, I actually have a few data sources that aren't labeled a district. So in the proper setting, if I was going to utilize this effectively, I want to go in there and actually change that data. So we're not going to change that today because we're going to look at some the information in a different way. But the first thing I just want to do is be able to understand that. The next thing I want to be able to do is be able to just understand exactly how much time this data is covering. So to do that is I'm just going to utilize our charts. So I'm gonna go to our data ribbon and just create a data clock. And that data clock is gonna allow me to say, hey, what's your date? What are the years, months at wedge? And now from here, what I'm able to find really quickly is just how much time does this actual data cover. Now, what I didn't realize is that I actually have a variety of points that are coming down that are possibly from 2005, February and March, but the majority of my data is from 2018 and 2019. So that tells me a little bit more about our information. At this point, what a lot of analysts end up doing when they pull this information down is they actually end up making different copies of the data to understand it. So the incident analysis tools, what they allow you to do is utilize a definition query. And this definition query just allows you to essentially plug in the date based on your current date and a time zone, time area. So this allows us to not have to make copies of the data. Instead, we're just referencing it in multiple layers. So what that allows me now to do is look at just the data that what's happened in the last 48 hours, what's happened in the last 72 hours, the last 30 days, month before last, and the entire data set. So this is actually just a copy of a layer referencing the same data source, so I could run my analysis against that, so I don't have to go and make multiple copies of that. What I can also do is look at here, I have this, when I copied over the DC crime data, I didn't actually reset this data set to be able to reflect the proper last 48 hours. So right now we're still looking at the data clock for the last years. So if I change this to the day of the week, it will allow me to go weeks. It'll allow me to see that as Monday. So that allows me to understand that Monday was the last 48 hours, it's Wednesday today. So that tells me that that is actually 81 of those incidents. So I have nothing pulled for Tuesday, but I have something for Monday. So now I'm understanding that last 48 hours of my data is only starts on Monday. So I have no Tuesday data in there, I have Monday. So this is just a variety of ways of how we can kind of explore the data itself before we actually get into the analysis to understand what can we do with it. So with that, what I did also wanted to do is be able to utilize the tools that come with incident analysis. So there's a cluster analysis. What cluster analysis allows us to do is just essentially be able to view this information in a different way. So instead of looking at the points, now I can look at what, where has the incidents happened, and then I ran this against the last 30 days. And that just gives me a point of that. The next thing a lot of people like to do is run an incident density. And when you run an incident density, what ends up happening is you end up getting something like this. So when we have something like this, it allows us to essentially have this heat map, and it's what we expected, right? Majority of the content around DC is probably going to happen in the inner city area. The challenge is that what I want to be able to do is explore the data a little bit better. So running this incident density, it creates two layers automatically for us, utilizing our polygon layers. The first is it creates just a density heat map, but then it also creates these significant hot spots and significant cold spots. So if I turn this off, what I start getting a better understanding of is what areas are trending and not trending. So I know this is hot, but there's some areas here that is a significant hotspot right outside the district. And then if I take this layer and I turn this layer on with the cluster analysis, now I have a little bit more contextual information of what's happening around DC for last month. From that point, what I want to be able to do is really answer a question, and we always think about this in the sense of like, what's changing? So there's a tool called find percent change. What find percent change allows us to do is take the area that's month before last and last month, or two different time frames, and be able to run those against each other. So from this, what I want to be able to do is just show what areas are actually increasing or decreasing. So from this, now what I have the ability to look at is where is crime increasing and decreasing. And now, even though that this was a significant cold spot, you know, there's 75% increase from last month to the month before last. So now as I start looking at the data, I can start gathering more information about the actual crime data. And that's utilizing the incident analysis tools. So these tools are free to download if you have access to solutions.archaea.com, and then start running these against your own data. And if you have any questions while running these tools, please feel free to reach out to myself or Seth, and we can make sure you get started. So that's the way we've consumed data from an open data portal. Now, what I want to do is be able to get these photos. So what Carl has done is Carl just shared just a folder of photos of the locations that he was been throughout the United States. And what I was able to do is be able to utilize our geoprocessing tool called geotag to photos to points. And what that does is it creates a layer, and this layer essentially allows us to then walk around and look throughout the different locations that Carl's traveled, and it actually attaches that photo as an attachment throughout all of the different locations. So it seems like the very first point that I think Carl started was with a DC game, DC baseball game a few years back. So with all this information, what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to utilize our incident sequence tool from Crime Analysis Toolbar. So what that allows us to do is ingest that point of photos, and then it creates a layer from there. And that layer just essentially, we're going to just sort based on the time. And let's say, for instance, I had a variety of people's photos and I have those associated with each individual. So I had multiple photos that I had downloaded. Maybe Seth gave me some photos as well. I could group those and show those different paths. So what ends up happening from there is now what I'm able to do is just walk through and look at all the different locations that Seth is, or I'm sorry, that Carl has been to. So from here, I can just go to the very first location, start seeing that he traveled to the West Coast. Then it looks like he went to Singapore. From Singapore, he went to a different location in Singapore, back to Los Angeles. Then he's in Abu Dhabi. And if I want to look at that actual location, I can just turn this off. Let's just zoom to that location for the photo. Let's see where he is. And there's that, he was in Dubai. I guess he took a photo of a shirt, and then here he took a photo of a beach. So what this tool allows us to do is just walk through exactly where Carl was during those times for each individual photo. So think about this in the sense if you have any type of geotag location or data, you can just consume that directly into ArcGIS and then start to understand the path that's related to that. So this is just a variety of ways of how we can use our Pro Tools to be able to enhance some of the data that comes from open data portals or also from our own data. At this point, Carl, we want to go back and poll the audience for another question, right?
Yep, we have a quick poll question relevant to kind of what we just showed you here. And it is, does your agency ingest data from outside sources such as open data portals and live feeds? So if you folks can answer that, there are a lot of open data portals out there. We just want to have an idea of are folks really leveraging that data. And again, with the caveats, right? It's still kind of buyer beware, where you need to go on. A lot of times you can determine if it's a .gov or if it's just some individual as to the how authoritative that data is. But again, our feeling here is that there's a lot out there, and we want to make sure people know to leverage it. And the answers are very positive. Yes, 73% are exploiting and taking advantage of that information already, which is great. If anybody, again, wants more information, I mean, almost 30% of the folks are not taking advantage of that. If there's something that we can do to help educate those folks on how to do that, again, at the survey at the end, please let us know. We'll be happy to reconnect with you guys. And we are now going to move on to the third module, and this one's going to be about what I'll call ingesting third-party, I'll call them third-party threat feeds. You know, some of it's part social media, but it's going to be highlighting two of our business partners, Factal and Global Incident Map. And how do we bring those data sources in? How do we understand what that data is, and then maybe a little bit of a trade craft to understand how to actually leverage that data and to, you know, help interrogate the data landscape that you folks might be using for a business problem. Over to you guys, Seth and Lyle.
Yep. So right now what we're looking at is the landing page for a solution we offer from Archaea Solutions for Business called multi-source data feeds. And the concept behind the solution is to allow our business partners data, those data providers that we work with that can enable our customers effectively to get them up and running effectively and quickly. So the multi-source data feeds allows us to consume that content utilizing our Python libraries and Windows Task Scheduler to be able to ingest it directly into the desktop for an analyst to do some analytical work, and also to ingest that information into your SaaS environment or enterprise, whichever one of our variations of our software that you utilize, and ingest that in a way that you're constantly pulling information from these data providers to get a better understanding of that. So I believe Seth is going to start with looking at global incident map and showing how we can get that information into our platform using Python notebooks, and that capability of what we'll show there is going to be readily available in January, and then from there we'll move on to Fractal. So Seth, can you show us some Python notebooks and how we would consume a GIS RSS feed into that?
Sure thing. So before I go into my notebook, I just want to showcase, this is how majority of folks that actually when they are purchasing or subscribe to a third-party data provider, they are accessing data through their feed or through their landing page. A lot of times they want to bring this information into the ArcGIS environment because that is where we are maintaining our authoritative spatial data. So I'm going to actually walk through how we can take the data that's in from this provider and bring it into our organization through Python notebooks. So the starting point is we're going to take these points, and now we're going to start with ArcGIS notebooks. And ArcGIS notebooks they use Jupyter and are widely used as a data science workbench to deliver hosted Python notebooks that are integrated right into your organization. And what Python notebooks allow our users to write, document, and run code all in one place and use the content that's within their organization right in this notebook. So to begin, I'm going to actually start with importing or starting to import the necessary libraries to bring in the GIM incident feed into Jupyter notebooks. So I need, I have a particular library that I need to install, and you can actually install those libraries right inside of Jupyter Notebook. Once I have that library set up, I can go ahead and start to import my feed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy in the URL to my to the URL that I have authenticated here. Let me just run this real quick. Go right here. So anyways, after I have my URL brought in, I can actually start to identify and read some of the entries that are within that feed. So right now we're looking at the first of 100 items. And the first item or first event is a case of swine flu that shows up in Jordan. So my next question is, well, what else can we do? What else can we extract from this data feed? So right here, I'm going to list out all the different variables that come from this feed. So this gives me some context into what I can do with this data. So I have some idea that I have a title, I have a summary of the event, I even have some geolocations, latitude and longitude. That's going to be key in the next component, because what we're going to do is take that feed of information and use the ArcGIS Python API to visualize that feed. So we're going to go from the contextual feed into viewing this information in ArcGIS. So what we're going to do is start to create a GIS object that's going to be used to create and convert that data into a map. And here is a view of what that map looks like. After that, maybe we want to get an idea of like how many events are showing up in our map. So we can ask that question. So right now, I've identified there are 100 features in this map. So there's 100 events that have happened. Alternatively, I want to actually take this information and produce a product that I can share within the organization and also perform spatial analysis on it. So using pandas library, I'm actually going to take that content and convert that information into a product or into a layer that's actually rich with context. So all the information that was in that feed is showing up when I click on them. So this map is interactive. I can pan around in this map and view some context. So again, I can click on a point and view some information about this particular point. The next thing I want to do is just package it up and publish it to our organization. And once it's published to our organization, we can then share that with others within, as well as perform some analysis. So the next thing I may want to ask myself is, all right, how many of those events are showing up in the world countries, just so I can get an idea of like which country is the most high risk. So I have this set up right here, accessing that content. But again, I just created a layer up here. In this notebook environment, I can go ahead and actually add in, here we go. I can add in any of my content. So if I look up incidents, I can see that information, and then I can just add that right in. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like, it's as simple as finding the content and bringing it right in. And what I'm going to do is just take this item ID and then push it right into our little cell to perform analysis on it. So right now, I'm accessing the content and then performing a summary analysis to give me this final output, which is content that summarizes the number of events that have happened in each country. So in this particular case, India has had 18 events that have happened in there. And furthermore, I could actually just go into my organization and view this layer in more detail. So if I click on this, this will open up right to that layer where I could then open this up into a map or add it into another application. So that was one way of ingesting information from third-party data feeds using Jupyter Notebooks. What I'm going to next talk through is ingesting information from another data provider named Factl. And Factl is a threat provider that has journalists on site that identify where threats are happening, and then they showcase that information in this feed. So what I want to do is exactly just what I just described in GAM. I want to take this content here and view it in the ArcGIS in my organization, in the ArcGIS platform. So we have a set of desktop tools for configuring and the provider to bring that content into ArcGIS, as well as a set of tools to perform analysis on that or to bring in information from that provider. So let me just jump back, because what I want to do is I'm actually interested in understanding all the active incidents. And what I want to do is bring in the information for all these active incidents right here. So we have a desktop tool that can actually do that. So it's a tool to explore active incidents. And once I have my API information, my authentication information configured up properly, I'm essentially logging into my account and accessing the content within my Factl account. So the incidents I just showed in the previous screen are showing up here. So let's say I want to look at this particular incident in Afghanistan. I can go ahead and run it. And right now it's utilizing the API, pulling information down, converting it to a GIS layer, and then it's going to be showing up in my map in a few seconds. So there we go. Here we have an idea of, here, let me actually just zoom right to it. Not sure why the points aren't showing up, because right here we have a point right there, but we can also view some context of this particular data set. So we have charts that are built in, so you can get an idea of how many events and what is the spread of severity across all the events in this particular incident. The next thing I want to do is, this is where I was actually performing ad hoc analysis. I wanted to review that content and then maybe even bring in some of my other organization content on desktop. The next thing I want to showcase is how we can actually view this on an ongoing basis. So we have a set of Windows Task Scheduler tools that can pull the API to bring this data in and hydrate a layer in ArcGIS Online. So what that looks like is in this format. So we have this dashboard that's constantly pulling in this data from our data provider, viewing this information. So right now we can actually start to explore all the Factl incidents that are within our area. And it's context sensitive, meaning that as I pan around, the panels and charts will update based off of what's in our view. Furthermore, if we want to check out a particular incident, We can click on it, zooms to it, we can get a description of that information. And furthermore, if we wanted to view some more details back in Factal, we can click here. That brings us back to this particular incident within Factal. And that essentially sums up some of the integration from doing, bringing in some of that data from Jupyter Notebook to utilizing the MSDF solution to bring in this content and view it not only in desktop, but in ArcGIS Online.
Hey,
I'll
Seth,
pass it back over.
Yeah, thank you, Seth. Can you go back to your dashboard really quick for Factal?
Mm-hmm.
So what you get when you download the solution from multi-source data feeds is you get the tool that Seth highlighted in the desktop application to consume the content directly for your analysts. You also get the configuration of being able to pull that information directly into your enterprise or your online account, ArcGIS Online instance, to then be able to configure this as well. We also give you a fully configured dashboard so you can start to visualize and understand that information. So what you're noticing is that a lot of the content that's available in the pop-up and available on the side is the same content that's coming in from Factal, just visualized in a way inside of the ArcGIS platform. So we want to help our customers and be able to do that. We also have a few different charts that Seth just highlighted that allow us to understand what content's happening in the recent past. And all of that can actually be filtered and focused on a particular area, just like what you saw Seth just did now. So with the solutions, what you actually end up getting is a complete system that allows you to ingest this information from these data providers and visualize this in a dashboard that is a fully configured finished product. You can also customize this any way you want to after you get it, but it is fully configured as what you see today. So with that, Carl, that's how we would ingest information from our third-party data providers. Carl, back to you.
All right, we have one question that came in, and I am going to give me 1 second so I can pull it up and address it. And Lyle or Seth, whoever is best suited, and if we need to send up follow-up information to the individual that asked the question, we'll send it to you directly. But the question is there a step-by-step process on how to use the Jupyter Notebooks using Python for the example that was just shown?
Absolutely. In January, we'll be releasing that step-by-step product about how to utilize that global incident map data directly into the Python notebooks. That will be inside the multi-source data feeds solution. If they would like to get information about that now, they can contact us directly, and we can actually set them up with a beta product before we release, and they would like to see what we're doing now with it. But absolutely.
All right, great. And so in addition to that, if there are additional questions and you want somebody to connect with you directly, just indicate in the survey. And as we close out, I just want to provide just a couple short summary pieces on why do we think this is important. So if you are a government agency, and about 60% of the folks on are from a local, state, federal, or international government agency, and you have an active overt or covert collection program, what can you do to add context to the data that you already have? And I think what we showed you is there's an abundance of, again, in the general sense of open source, open data information that's available to you, and it can provide additional understanding, context to a problem set that you're dealing with, or a case or an investigation. If you're a private sector organization, a GSOC, a corporate security group that may struggle with getting access to data, we showed, and again, it was just the tip of the iceberg, what is some of the data that's readily available to you, some of it that's free if you're already invested into the ArcGIS platform through the Living Atlas, through ArcGIS Online, or we showed you some examples of some third-party feeds with Factal and GIM. If you opt, you could purchase directly from them to bring in additional, in these examples, threat feeds. But really the bottom line here is there's information out there that is readily available, that somebody else is paying for to create. They are doing the QA/QC, and then they are sharing it. And that means you don't have to worry about it. You just have to figure out how to access it and use it. And that, I think, is really the power of what we're trying to show here today. So again, if there's additional follow-up, please let us know on your survey. Otherwise, we are going to end the webinar now, and we will see you next time at the in 2020 when we continue our public safety webinar series. Thanks, and have a great day.